Alright, hello everybody. Welcome back to my channel, Second City Sports. We're going to be doing another mock draft today. It's just going to be me. It's going to be pretty similar to the last mock draft I did solo. No trades, anything like that, but we have some new information on the players. I think it's worth going in and giving it another look. Obviously, the draft's coming up this Friday, so I wanted to do one more of these, so let's get started. Actually, before we do get started, make sure to remember to like the video if you like it, subscribe, all that good YouTuber stuff. And now let's get started. With the first overall pick in the 2025 NHL entry draft, I believe the New York Islanders will select Matthew Schaefer, left-handed defenseman from the Erie Otters of the OHL. So Schaefer has been the consensus number one overall pick since probably right after the World Juniors. Team Canada got noticeably worse after he was hurt. He unfortunately missed the rest of the season, but he was super impressive. 17 games played, 7 goals, 15 assists. Again, he was injured. That sucks. I'm not as high on him as I think a lot of people are. Don't get me wrong, I think he will be a very good NHL defenseman. I could see him definitely even being like an all-star. I don't think he'll ever be like the best defenseman in the league, if that makes sense, but I don't think really anybody in this class is a franchise player. So yeah, I think he will go number one. I think the Islanders will be pretty happy with themselves, especially since they weren't expecting to pick this high, realistically. And I think that pretty much says it all. So with the second overall pick, I believe the San Jose Sharks will select Michael Misa. Misa is a former exceptional status player. I think him and Schaefer, honestly, are a tier above everybody else in this draft class. I think he's a phenomenal playmaker. He's a goal scorer. He's got good height, good hands, everything you could want in a player. I think San Jose will be very lucky to have him. I've seen some things recently where they're saying the Sharks might prefer Anton Frundell, but I think that's mostly just smoke and mirrors or websites trying to get numbers. I believe Misa and Schaefer will be the first two picks in this draft. If anything, it would be more likely, instead of Frundell going at 2 instead of Misa, it would be Misa goes at 1 instead of Schaefer, and then San Jose takes Schaefer. I think Schaefer and Misa are pretty much a lock to go 1 and 2 in this draft. So with the third overall pick, I have the Chicago Blackhawks selecting Anton Frundell from Sweden. Frundell is a bit of an interesting pick here. He's not the player I would choose. I would prefer like Porter Martone or Hagens or even a Jake O'Brien over him. The main issue with Frundell is his transition game, but I think a lot of that has to do with playing in Sweden and the bigger ice. I think he might actually be a player who is better once he moves to North America. I think it'll suit his game more. Next season, I believe he's going to be playing in Sweden still because his team got promoted to the SHL. I wouldn't hate the pick. It wouldn't make me angry. He's not the guy I would go with personally if I was Kyle Davidson, but I understand it. I think he will be a good NHL player at some point. Okay, so next up we have the Utah Mammoth at 4th overall. I have them selecting Jake O'Brien from the Brantford Bulldogs. 4 is a very interesting spot in this draft, especially since it seems by all accounts Frundell is going to go top 3 now. So 4 is where it kind of opens up. There's a lot of good players Utah can take. Utah's in a pretty good position. They can kind of draft for need as opposed to just taking best player available. I have them going with Jake O'Brien because I feel O'Brien is kind of the in-between of James Hagens and Caleb Desnoyers. He has the size of Caleb. He's got a decent two-way game, and he's a terrific playmaker, kind of like Hagens. I think this would be a pretty good pick for them. I'm interested to see if they actually do it and who actually is going to go at 4. But I like Jake O'Brien to Utah. So with Nashville at 5, I have them taking James Hagens here. Obviously, Nashville had a very disappointing season last year. They spent big in free agency, and the team just absolutely sucked. I think Hagens is a really good player. He was expected to be the number 1 pick coming into the year. He was outperformed by some other prospects. I think it's still kind of surprising that in this mock, and I think it's probably going to happen at the draft too, that he's slipping to number 5. But I think Nashville's getting a pretty good steal here at 5. Obviously, he didn't light up the world, but he was playing in the NCAA, which is probably the toughest league you could play of, or you could play in. I'm sorry, outside of like the AHL, NHL, or maybe the KHL. Um, I'm a big fan. I think he's going to be a great player, potentially an all-star. At pick number 6, we have the Philadelphia Flyers. I have them taking Caleb Desnoyers. Desnoyers isn't my favorite prospect in this draft, but I will say he is probably one of the safest picks. Um, Playing in the QMJHL, that to me is a bit of a knock, considering the Q is the weakest of the CHL leagues. But still, he had a very good year, 35 goals, 49 assists. He's got great size. He's got a two-way game. It'll be interesting to see where he fits in at the next level. But considering Philly today, they traded for Trevor Zegras, and they already have Mitchkov and stuff. Maybe having like a good two-way center is a nice fit for this team at this point. At 7 overall for the Boston Bruins, I am going to take Porter Martone. I think this would be an absolute steal for Boston at number 7. Martone was pretty much a consensus, like top 5, top 3 pick throughout the year. He slipped a little bit in the off season. I think that's more just due to teams prioritizing center, apparently. Um, he's a bit of a weird player. He's an extremely talented playmaker, but you would think with his height and weight that he would be more physical. He's not really a physical player yet. I think that's something he can grow into, and I think Boston would be very, very happy to get him at 7. At 8th overall for the Seattle Kraken, I have them selecting Brady Murka. I think Murka's arguably either the first or second best defender in this class, depending on how you rank him and Jackson Smith. I think being a right shot defenseman, I think he will go before Smith. Obviously, 6'6", he's very big. The skating, I think, needs to improve a little bit, but he's not an awful skater. Uh, I don't think he's ever going to put up a ton of points in the NHL, but I think he's a very, very good, probably defensive defenseman who can maybe contribute a little bit offensively. I think with what Seattle has, obviously they have Matty Beniers, Shane Wright, Berkeley, Cadden, and stuff like that. I think they could take a defenseman here, and I think Myrta would be a very good fit. At 9th overall, we have the Buffalo Sabres. I'm going to have them select Victor Eklan with this pick. To be honest, personally, I actually like Eklan a bit more as a prospect than Frundell, but I think NHL teams will favor Frundell. Uh, I think he's just going to be a very, very good offensive player in the NHL. Maybe just a true sniper. I think whatever team gets him is going to be very excited. I think for Buffalo, this pick makes sense. Buffalo has just been so bad for so long. I think having like a dynamic scorer maybe could be something that helps them finally figure it out a little bit. But it's Buffalo. It's a bad situation over there. At 10th overall for Anaheim, I have them selecting Brady Martin. I think Martin could honestly go higher than this. Like him and Jake O'Brien, I think either one of these players could go at number 4 for Utah. Martin is more of a pure like physical forechecking type of player, whereas O'Brien's more of a playmaker. I think if I could even see him like if Buffalo could maybe even want him instead of Eklan. I think Martin makes a lot of sense here, though. He seems to be the kind of player that Pat Verbeek likes, even though I think Pat Verbeek is a pretty bad GM. But he is the type of player Pat likes, and I think Brady Martin will be a very, very good player at the next level. All right, so at number 11 for Pittsburgh, this was kind of a weird pick because they need a lot of things, and I honestly think they need to start focusing on rebuilding the team instead of trying to give Crosby and Malkin like one last run. But I have them taking Jackson Smith here from the Tri-City Americans. I think Smith is a very dynamic playmaking defenseman. I've honestly, it's between him and Murka for second best defenseman in this class because Schaefer's obviously the best one. It kind of depends what a team needs and what a team wants to build around, but I think Jackson Smith getting a playmaking defenseman early in your rebound would be really nice for Pittsburgh, and that's why I think he makes sense here. Now, next up, we have the New York Rangers. Obviously, they might forfeit this pick, but at my time of recording this, they haven't yet. So I have them selecting Roger McQueen. Now, McQueen coming into this year was expected to probably be a top five, top three pick. Unfortunately, he had a pretty bad injury, and that's kind of knocked him down the boards. But 6'5", he's got a lot of skill. Um, it'll be interesting to see where he actually goes undrafted because I could definitely still see him being a top 10 pick. I just don't know where. I think there's other guys ahead of him now. But I think whoever gets him in a spot like this is getting amazing value. Uh, Again, super big with skill. Um, at a minimum, he's a guy that you could just say go stand in front of the goalie on the power play and he'll put up some points for you. But I think he could be a lot more than that, and I think whoever gets him is going to be very happy with themselves. For the Detroit Red Wings at number 13, I have them selecting Carter Bear. Carter Bear, unfortunately, he had a really bad injury to finish the year, but from what I've read, it seems like he's going to be ready to go for training camp, which is good. Obviously, he's not going to make the team straight out of camp anyway. He's probably going to end up back in junior or in the NCAA. But still, it's good to see that he's at least going to get to be around at training camp and probably participate a little bit at least. I think he's honestly one of the most talented players in this draft. I think the injury shouldn't be that big of a concern for teams. Um, I think in the future he'll be a really effective, probably like two-way forward, bit of a stuff like that. I think he's a very good player. Next up, we have the Blue Jackets at pick number 14. I have them selecting Justin Carbanu. Carbanu is a pure offensive player. Unfortunately, I say unfortunately, uh, he's a QMJHL guy. I'm not a big fan of the Q, like I've already said. But I think he's got enough. Like he had 61 penalty minutes this year, so he's got at least a little bit of edge to his game. Very good goal scorer, good playmaker. Uh, Columbus has a tendency to get rated for their best players every couple of years, so I think it would be nice for them to have just a guy in the system that they could eventually put on their top six. So next up, we have the Vancouver Canucks at pick number 15. They're having a bit of a weird offseason. Their general manager basically said, well, Quinn Hughes might want to leave to go play with his brother. I'm not going to be taking a defenseman here. I'm actually going to go with Braden Coots from the Seattle Thunderbirds. Uh, I think he could be a very dynamic, like two-way forward in the league. I just think he's a pretty safe pick at this spot. I think they could use a good forward. Um, you know, you never know what's going to happen with Quinn Hughes at this point. He might just want out, and that would probably set them into a full-blown rebuild. So it'd be nice to have a good two-way center in the system for when that happens, if that happens. Next up, we have Montreal with both the 16th and 17th picks in this draft. Um, I definitely see them moving off one of these picks. I don't think that there's really much point to picking back to back unless you really like two players in the spots that you have. But considering how kind of average this draft class is, it might be smarter to move back with one of those picks and get assets, or try to move up in this class to get one of the better players. But in this scenario, obviously we're not doing trades, so we're going to pick two players here. The first guy I'm going to pick is going to be Kashan Aes. Super physical defenseman. Has a really, but is like a two-way player as well. He isn't one-dimensional by any stretch of the imagination. He'd be another nice young defenseman to add to that core they've got over there. And the second player I'm going to go with forward here, I'm going to go with Lyndon Lakovich from the Moose Jaw Warriors. Lakovich, 6'4", physical player. He's got some skill as well, but he's mostly there for physicality and stuff like that. I think he'll just be a good NHL player, probably unspectacular, but like solid player at the next level. And I think if they decided to draft both those players, it would be pretty nice for them. I think if they had to choose one, they would probably choose Aitchison because I think his ceiling's a bit higher, but you never know. Number 18 now, we have the Calgary Flames. They got this pick from the New Jersey Devils. I have them selecting Benjamin Kindle from the Calgary Hitmen, which would be nice. He gets to stay in Calgary and stuff. That would be pretty cool. But he's also a terrific playmaker. The one knock on him is he is undersized. He's only 5'10", 176. But still, I think the skill is there, and I think this is the kind of draft class where you can kind of take a punt on this guy, see if it works out, see if he can play at the next level, even with all the physicality and stuff. And I think they kind of lack that right now. So I think Kindle makes sense with this pick. Now at number 19, we have the St. Louis Blues. I have them selecting Logan Hensler from the University of Wisconsin. Truth is, I think St. Louis could just use a defenseman. They have a bunch of good young forwards. The defensive core is getting a bit old. I think Hensler is probably the best defenseman left at this point. It's pretty much as simple as that. I think he'll be a good player in the NHL. I don't think he's really spectacular or anything, but solid player there. So next up, we have the Columbus Blue Jackets at number 20, and I'm going to have them take Joshua Ravensburg. He's going to be the first goalie to go in the NHL draft this year. I think it's just a case of Columbus really needs a good young goaltender. They don't really have anyone great in their system, and their actual goalies this year were pretty awful. So I think Ravensburg is a good pick here. Again, this is a pretty weak draft class. So, and considering Columbus already has a bunch of good young players, and they took another one earlier in Carbanu in this mock, I think they can afford to take a risk here, go for a goalie early, even if it is probably a little bit of a reach. Now, obviously, there's also other good goalies later in the draft, but I think if you get a chance and you're in a position where you can afford it, I think taking Ravensburgen is definitely worth a risk. At 21, we have the Ottawa Senators. I have them taking Malcolm Spence. The Sens chose to keep this pick, even though they had a choice between giving up this year or next year's pick. I think the main reason they kept it is they think they can talk the NHL out of taking the other pick away, which is, fine if they could pull it off. I wouldn't want to give up next year's pick just in case there's a slight chance you can get a Gavin McKenna out of it somehow. But anyway, Malcolm Spence. Malcolm Spence is a very good power forward. I think he fits Ottawa's style of play based on what we saw, especially in the playoffs against Toronto. I think they were trying to be the more physical team out there. I think they want to kind of create like a Florida-like team, and I think Malcolm Spence could really help with that. With Philly at 22, I have them selecting Cameron Reed. Obviously, they took Dorier earlier in this mock, so I could definitely see them going for multiple positions, especially since they just acquired Trevor Zegras. So you don't need to draft too many forwards this year early. I think Cameron Reed's a good two-way defenseman. He is a bit undersized, but I think his skating, his playmaking, I think he could be a player at the next level for them. I think they do need help on defense as well, and I think he's the best that's still available, so I have them going with Cameron Reed. So Nashville is back up again at 23. I have them taking Bill Zanin with this pick here. He's kind of similar to Malcolm Spence. I just like Spence a little bit better than him. But I think with them taking Hagens in this mock early, you maybe want a bit more of a power forward. He has some playmaking ability too. 55 assists is nothing to sneeze at. I could definitely see him playing a role for that team in the future. It looks like even though they just spent all that money that they might be heading into a rebuild or a reshuffle. And I think Bill Zanin is a pretty good piece to take here. Next up for the LA Kings, I have them taking Sasha Budin with the 24th overall pick. I have them going with a defenseman here. Sasha was obviously very good at the U18 tournament that just happened. I think he'll be a good player. I don't think he's going to be a star by any means, but really anybody you're getting at this point in this draft, I don't think they really have star potential at the moment. He's playing in the NCAA, which I think is a plus. I really like NCAA players. Obviously, they're a bit of an older team. Guys like Kopitar and Doughty are really starting to get up there in age. They still have some good young players. Obviously, Byfield's there, a couple others. But I think Budin, I think he's a bit of a risky pick, but given that the Kings are still pretty competitive and his high upside, I think it's worth taking a chance on him. For the Blackhawks at 25, I have them taking Cole Reshny. I think that's how you say his last name in the spot. Uh, Pure playmaker. Again, a bit undersized, but obviously with them taking Frondell earlier, albeit Frondell is only 6 foot, but he plays like kind of a power forward. Um, I think Reggie just kind of makes sense. I think the Hawks could use like more pure playmakers in their system. They don't really have that. They tend to draft guys that have like high two-way game potential. I think he's just a good pick, and he gives the Blackhawks system a bit of diversity. I have Blake Fiddler going 26 to the Nashville Predators. So in this mock, I've had them take 2 forwards already, and so that's kind of I'm choosing to go defenseman here. I think Fiddler is a solid prospect. He's pretty unspectacular, but he is big. He is physical. Um, I think he's a guy who can definitely have an NHL spot in the future. I don't really think he's ever going to be like a top pair guy, but maybe like a top four defenseman or a really good like fifth or sixth defenseman. Uh, so I think he's a solid pickup here for them. For the Washington Capitals at 27, I have them taking Milton Gastrin. I'm a pretty big fan of Gastrin. I could definitely see him going higher than this, but the main thing that sticks out about him is his speed. Um, you know, again, he's got some two-way ability as well, but I think he's just a really good player. I think he gives the Capitals a little bit something different, and I think they're going to need some young forwards. Guys like, Ovechkin and Wilson, they're starting to get old, so obviously they have, like Strome and a couple other really good young players, but I think Gastrin is a good player, and I think he could play either at center or wing. I definitely think they'd like him at center if they take him, but I think he's just a nice choice for them here, considering they already have like a pretty good team. So for Winnipeg at 28, I have them going with Jack Nesbit. Nesbit, I see him just as a good middle six forward, two-way player, physical player. I don't have really a ton to say about him. I do like him quite a bit, but never going to really be a star in this league or anything. But I think he could just be like a really, really good middle six player, center, and I think Winnipeg likes those kinds of players. Jack Murta is a pretty similar player to Jack Nesbit. So I have him going to Carolina. I have Nesbit going one spot ahead. But I think that, again, like he'll be a solid NHL player. Like, again, not going to be a star, not going to change your franchise, but just a solid, probably middle six player for you. And he plays center, so why not take him here if you're Carolina? So for San Jose at 30, I have them going for Jacob Waznjak here. I really like Waznjak. He's big. He's got some scoring touch. Um, I think just a really good player. I think he's something that San Jose kind of lacks as well. Obviously, I have them taking Misa in this class, so they get another good young forward to add to their already pretty solid core that they're building there with Celebrini and Will Smith. So I think Wozniak makes sense. Okay, so I'll be completely honest. With Philly at 31, I have them taking Ivan Ryabkin. The main reason I'm doing that is so that they can give Matave Michkov a nice Russian buddy to play with. But I still do like Ryabkin. Obviously, he's fallen massively. Like I think he started this year as like pretty much a top 10 pick, and he just kind of had like an average year in the USHL, was pretty unspectacular there. But I could still see a team going early first round, especially a team like Philly, since they've had like a bunch of draft picks early. I could see them taking a chance on a guy like him. And, he's a guy who still might pay off. Obviously, it's not easy to move to a different country and stuff. That could be part of the reason for his lack of production. So we'll see how he does in the future. I think Philly would still be pretty happy with him. And so with the 32nd pick and the last pick of this mock draft, the Calgary Flames, I have them selecting Cameron Schmidt of the Vancouver Giants. So I have them to take 2 players from the Western Hockey League here. and they're both kind of similar players, him and Kindle. I think Schmidt's a bit more of a goal scorer. Uh, he's undersized, 5'7", 157. He's at the very least going to have to put on a little bit more weight if he wants to play in the NHL and stuff. But again, in a weaker draft class, I think he's a guy that you can afford to take a chance on, especially with his high skill upside and stuff. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a team take him in the first round, and I think he could definitely go at 32 to Calgary. Alright guys, I just want to say thank you for making it to the end of this video. Once again, leave a like if you enjoyed it, subscribe to my channel if you want to see more. And I hope you have a good day wherever you are. And yeah, that's it. So, bye-bye.